Okay. How is everyone today? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Jason Levine, and welcome to How to Make Great Videos with Audio. Today, we're going to be working directly inside of Premiere Pro. Maybe we'll bounce into Audition for a thing or two here and there. But the idea behind this first episode of this series is to kind of give you an idea of some of the powerful tools that you already have in Premiere, including the recently released, it's only been in Premiere about a year, I guess, the Essential Sound Panel. What we're going to do is we're going to start in Premiere and focus on a piece that many of you have seen on some of the previous live streams, a short film called See You Around, which was directed by Oren Brimmer, which has kind of all the audio elements that we want to focus on. And I'm going to show you some very cool ways here directly in Premiere at a very basic level to get things sounding really good really quickly. Okay, let's bounce over and switch our screen and hop into Premiere. So we're going to start by listening to this little piece here. So what's great about this session, this is the actual rough cut edit of this particular bar scene, is that it has all of the sort of commonly encountered audio elements that you would expect in a typical sort of dialogue-filled scene where we've got a couple of different speakers and all the tracks here in green are the dialogue tracks. Then we've got some sound design, some ambient sound, kind of recreating the sound of the bar and the environment, various little sort of Foley type effects, and then music, of course. And when you're on set, naturally, everything's recorded sort of quietly, right? And if people are dancing and pretending to, groove to the beat, that's all added back in later. You don't try and capture dialogue in a noisy bar because it's challenging enough with a crew and cameras and lights and all the sonic issues that you run into when you're actually on location. So first, let's take a listen to this in its raw form. And what you'll hear is that there's obviously, first and foremost, an imbalance in the levels of the dialogue. And this is something that you will encounter no matter what kind of project you work on. Different speakers, different ways of talking. Everybody speaks at a different average level, loudness level, and you're going to sort of get that revealed here. Now, I'm going to play this back with everything, so you can kind of hear that some of the dialogue is louder than others and some jumps out a bit more than others. And the idea around this is we're going to be able to very quickly, with a single click, basically equalize all of that dialogue so it's the same apparent loudness. All right, so let's take a quick listen to this scene from See You Around. Here we go.
Hi, I'd like to order.
Okay.
Great, I'd like an elderberry.
Oh, actually, we don't have that.
I've been here before and I've never been here, so.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Okay. All right, so right away you can hear that there's obviously this imbalance. And even with each speaker, the dude who comes up to the bar, you kind of hear his, hi, I'd like an, like he sort of trails off. She's a bit louder. Then he says something else, it's barely intelligible. Then she says something, it's a bit quieter. Then he says thank you at the end right here, and you almost can't hear it at all. So this is very common, and we know that there's audio in these tracks, but everybody speaks a little bit differently. And remember, of course, too, that when you're on set, you might be capturing this with a whole different series of microphones. Sometimes you've got boom mics. Some of the dialogue actually in this edit has actually been replaced. It's ADR. They went back and sort of revoiced some of these sections because, again, sometimes you just don't capture it the way you want. Maybe you didn't get the feel that the director wanted, or just perhaps there was just some kind of problem in the audio and it needed to be replaced. So the first thing I'll typically do is solo out all of the audio tracks so I can hear everything more discreetly. So here inside of Premiere Pro's track mixer, and that's what we're going to be largely focusing on today, our track-based properties. We're going to go ahead and solo these first 4 tracks. Always a good idea to label your tracks inside the mixer. You will thank yourself, your colleagues will thank you. Now, something else to consider too, before you start listening to the dialogue a bit more critically, you've got to remember that you need to have a good listening environment to actually mix this stuff in and tweak and repair these kinds of things. You can see here that I'm using headphones. These are industry standard Sony MDR 7506. These are not super expensive. They're not the most expensive. They're not the greatest sounding headphones. They are an industry standard. They're affordable, and they just kind of work. And if you don't have a quiet enough environment where you can rely on speakers, or maybe you don't have the best speakers to work with, I'd recommend getting something like a pair of these. So when we solo this and listen to the dialogue discreetly, now you're going to start to hear all of the problems that people face, and not problems, just the issues people face when you record on set in an environment with a huge crew, or even a small crew, or any kind of crew, just capturing sound live in an environment. You can hear a lot of noise and rumble and hum. Take a listen again. Here we go.
Hi, yeah, hi. I'd like to get a drink, please.
Okay.
Great. I'd like an elderberry liqueur.
Oh, actually, we don't have that.
Okay. So you can hear that there's a lot of all this kind of stuff. Now, before we even tackle that, the first thing I need to do, because it's driving me crazy that these dialogue levels are all over the place. And you might be thinking, well, why don't you just go in and use keyframes and make this clip a little louder and this one softer? Well, yes, you can absolutely do that. But we have a better way. And this is where we're going to start now, working in the Essential Sound panel. Now, this was designed to, again, allow editors easy access to the tools and filters that you need to mix the 4 basic audio types you'll often encounter: dialogue, music, sound effects, and ambience. So one of the first things you want to do is you want to tell Essential Sound what the audio is that you're working with. Now, you can do this on an individual clip basis, or you can do this across multiple clips at the same time. Because I'm going to be working with dialogue for the moment, I'm going to select all the dialogue clips down here. And when I do that, you'll now see that inside Essential Sound, it allows me to assign an audio type. So I'm simply going to click this button here for dialogue. And instantly when I do that, what it does now is it reveals a whole series of effects and filters that you would commonly use to process dialogue. So you don't have to think about, oh, what do I need to improve clarity? I need a compressor. Again, if you're not really an audiophile or just very familiar with audio mixing, you might not know that. We reveal all of these things front and center for you. Now, the first place we're going to start is in loudness auto matching. This is probably one of the greatest additions or greatest features inside this Essential Sound panel, because what loudness auto matching does is it takes a look and analyzes all of the clips that you have selected, and it'll automatically match them to a broadcast standard loudness level, which in this case for Premiere Pro happens to be -23 LUFS. And that's the scale we're working in, LUFS standing for loudness units relative to full scale. So with all of our dialogue selected, if I simply go up to this little loudness panel right here, and you can even see it gives you a little tooltip, automatically match clips to a standard average loudness for dialogue. If I click on auto match, just like that, it's done. And you can see that it has now auto-matched to a target loudness of -23 LUFS. So now, when I play this back, what you will hear is that all of the dialogue is audible. It's intelligible. So let's just unsolo everything now with the music and the sound effects and everything back in there. And you're actually going to be able to hear what everybody is saying. Take a listen.
Hi, yeah, hi. I'd like to get a drink, please.
Okay.
Great. I'd like an elderberry liqueur.
Oh, actually, we don't have that.
I've been here before, and I've definitely had it here, so you.
Okay. So unlike before where we had these huge dramatic drops in level, auto match automatically says, okay, make everything the same loudness. And I want to emphasize again, we're not talking about peak levels. Peaks are not going to help you here. It's that average loudness, that average listening level. Single click auto match does it for you. If you're working with multiple speakers, multiple people on camera, if you've got music, and you'll see this not today, but in another episode where we talk about working with music and sound effects tracks, this is a great way to make all of your music tracks the same loudness, right? Because if you're working with something that's like an EDM cut that you have underneath a scene versus a classical cut versus a jazz cut versus just a pop music track, it's very likely that the average loudness of those will vary. This single function will make them all that same apparent loudness, which ultimately is going to save you time because you'll be doing less manual keyframing and enveloping of volume curves down inside the timeline. So let's go back and solo this again. All right. And now we're going to start tackling some of the more problematic things that we're hearing, which is, again, some of that rumble and hum, just some of those ambient elements, they're kind of getting in the way. So let's take a listen again. Now, a bit more critically, soloing all of those dialogue tracks. Here we go.
Hi, yeah, hi. I'd like to get a drink, please.
Okay.
Great. I'd like an elderberry liqueur.
Oh, actually, we don't have that.
I've been here before, and I've definitely had it here, so you have it.
Okay. So you can hear there's a lot of that. All right, that's hum. And then if you're in headphones or on good loudspeakers right now, you might also hear, I can't vocally create the rumble sound for you, but it's not subsonic frequency, but it's definitely sub 60 hertz frequency. This is just that low end, if you think like a jackhammer in the street that kind of persists. You often get this on set. Sometimes this can be electrically induced based on the power that you're using in the environment you're in. Sometimes you just might be in an environment where there's what are known as standing waves. So when you have sound waves bouncing off the walls, it's creating kind of this very murky low-end rumble. It's the kind of thing that kind of shakes the sound a little bit. And this is very distracting. Now, you want certain amounts of room tone and ambient sound to be present in the dialogue to recreate an environment, in this case, a bar. But these things are just annoying and they're just getting in the way. So how do we fix those? Well, once again, in Essential Sound, you'll see that we have effectively, and I'm just going to shrink these up for a moment so I can show you all the various things that we give you. You've got sort of 4 basic categories that you can work with. All right, so we already saw loudness, that's auto matching. And then you've got repair, clarity, and creative. So repair is the first one that we're going to work with. Now, it's also worth pointing out that if you just want to try, open up Essential Sound and throw on a preset to get working, you'll see that we've got lots of presets in here, which will do a whole series of things automatically. It'll automatically apply X number of these filters to your clips. And you can see we've got everything from various balanced voice presets to cleaning up noisy dialogue, making it sound like it's radio-like or from a phone or from the TV. In a large or small room, this is going to add a certain amount of creative reverb ambience to your things. Make close-up, make distant. This is leveraging some of our clarity or dynamic compression effects. And then again, you've got some others, podcast voice, which is going to be a combination of all these effects working together. So I want to just point out that we have presets which will use all of these various filters in some way to get you started. Knowing sort of how to break it down, though, is going to make your life a lot easier because then you'll be able to hear and know immediately what it is that you need to tackle or need to fix. So the first thing I can hear that really is troublesome is that rumble. So I'm going to come over here, and if you take a look, once again, I love our tooltips in this panel because if you just highlight over reduce rumble, it says reduce low frequency sounds and plosives. Plosives are those popping P's. And once again, if you're on, even if you're on a boom mic with a supercardioid or hypercardioid polar pattern, which means it's a very focused pickup, it's still possible for someone to actually have a P when they say, "Where's the party?" That could cause this sort of low-end burst of air that it doesn't sound good, and you get this like in your recording. So reduce rumble will handle all of that. So if I enable reduce rumble, and I go ahead and start playing this back. Now, by default, it's at 5. Let's go ahead and just crank this up a little bit to around 6.5, maybe just about 7. I'm going to play this back, then I'm going to turn it on or off, and you'll really be able to hear what this is doing. Take a listen.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's skip ahead to this longer piece. So let's start with it off, and then I'll turn it on, and you'll see how suddenly all this like super low stuff just goes away. Here we go.
Yeah, no, we don't have it.
Okay, so you could really hear it at the beginning of this clip where there's just this like, it's almost like that. If you imagine where you see space scenes, someone standing in a spaceship when there's no dialogue, and there is this sort of persistent low end. It's more than just hum because you can actually feel it moving. That's rumble. That can be used as a sound effect, but this is just straight ahead dialogue. We don't need it. So I can immediately reduce rumble across all of these clips. Now currently they're all selected. You don't necessarily apply it to everything because that rumble may be different. Just showing you that because it happens to be fairly uniform across these clips, I can do that across all of them very simply. Now, the other issue, of course, is de-humming, right? And it's great because it says here, reduce hum sounds caused by electrical interference. So over here, we're dealing with 60 hertz, most common in, you can see, North and South America, all right? So let's go ahead and choose this. Let's turn on the de-hum, and let's maybe bring this down to around 4 or so. And once again, I'll start with it off, and then I'll turn it on, okay? Take a listen. Here we go.
Yeah, no, we don't have it.
All right. Let's try another little clip over here so you can hear it. So here it is before.
Hey, you know, I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just...
And by the way, hum at 60 and 50 hertz has a particular pitch, okay? So again, if you're in good headphones or good speakers, you're going to hear that it sounds like just lower, right? So this de-hum filter will take that out. And of course, you can modify these in real time as well. So let's go ahead and turn this on. And I'm going to move this slider and start taking some of that hum out. Here we go.
Oh, okay. You know, I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, we don't have it.
Okay. So very quickly, you get rid of those, okay? De-rumble, de-hum. Super effective, super easy. Now, as I mentioned again, you might start going through these and realizing that, okay, this clip has a little bit more hum on it than the others do.
Okay.
Or maybe it doesn't need quite as much. So on an individual clip basis, we can back these off and kind of fine-tune them as needed.
A drink, please.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna tackle this one too.
Hi, yeah, hi. I'd like to get a drink, please.
That's kind of nice. And again, if we sort of take this off for a second, here's before.
Hi, yeah, hi. I'd like to get a drink, please.
And then here's after.
Hi, yeah, hi. I'd like to get a drink, please.
Pretty significant, right? Now, again, you will have to listen to this critically. If you overdo reduce hum, reduce rumble, you can start to thin out the voices. So be careful. And again, based on whatever the scene is, you might want to leave a little bit of that in there just to, again, kind of create that environment. It's okay to have a little. Just be mindful that if you leave some of that in there and then you process it later with compression or limiting, which we'll get to, you're also compressing and limiting rumble and hum. And you don't want any of that. Not to be confused with rattle and hum. It's a U2 reference. Okay, so hum and rumble. Now, you'll also notice, of course, that there is some background noise in here. And this is where we could effectively use reduce noise. Now, I want to talk about this feature just real briefly. This is what we call adaptive noise reduction. And this is extremely powerful, really awesome, except that what it has to do to adapt is that it has to listen for the noise and then adapt to it and then start denoising. So the problem is when you have a scene where you've got all these clips that are cut into small sections with very little handles on the top and the tail, or the front, the beginning and the end, it causes this effect, this filter, to keep re-listening and re-adapting and relearning. So you kind of get this as it listens and then denoises. So it's not the most ideal for this kind of dialogue scenario. It can sound very good. So if I were to say, let's say, turn it on this clip right here, which is a little bit longer. Let's go ahead and turn on reduce noise. Now, did you hear what just happened right there? Right? You actually hear it learning and adapting to the noise. The problem is that it has to do that for each of these clips. So I'm going to show you a little bit later a way to kind of get around that by using submixing and perhaps using some of our other effects and filters. If you don't have those cut sections in there, you won't have that issue. All right. But just very quickly, take a listen to what it sounds like. And I might even back this off a little bit to around 4. Let's play it back again and take a quick listen. So here it is without the noise reduction.
Yeah, no, we don't have it.
And here it is with the noise reduction.
Yeah, no, we don't have it.
Now, I'd probably back it off even more, but you can hear that all of that is gone, all right? And again, it's gone enough because once we put back in the bar sound and the ambient sound and the clinking of glasses and music, a little bit of noise on there doesn't matter. And this is something else that I like to point out too, is that having a little bit of noise is okay, right? Particularly if you're in a live environment. If you're filming something that's meant to be in a small, close room, you're doing sort of a two-head dialogue interview, yes, it should be very, very quiet. But here, there is some noise. That's part of the room tone, and that's okay. And when you're actually in your final mix, that's where you'll look to see, okay, maybe there's too much background noise or too much rumble or too much hum. And then you have to treat those things accordingly. Sometimes you can get away with it globally. Sometimes you have to tweak individual clips. So now that we've made some modifications to this, reducing noise, reducing rumble, reducing hum, it's very nice if you're not an audio expert to see single sliders and have them do all that work with just one control, right? But I, being an audio engineer, I want more control. Like I know that noise reduction sounds okay, but if I could adjust the noise floor or fine-tune it a little, I could make it sound even better. But obviously, one slider doesn't let me do that. Well, what Essential Sound is actually doing is it's applying these effects non-destructively at the clip level. So remember, I was saying we're going to focus on our track mixer. So the track mixer affects everything that lives in that track. But at the clip level, if we go into our effects controls, this now in audio, just like with applying video effects, whether it's color or over, any kind of visual effect that you can apply directly to a clip, it's the same thing here. We've got audio effects non-destructively applied to each clip. So if I want more control over reducing my noise on this particular clip, you'll notice that inside the effects controls for that clip, what you actually see is that it's applied adaptive noise reduction, an FFT filter, which is what we're using for the de-rumbling, and then the de-hummer to reduce the amount of hum. So if you click on Edit, this will now pull up the adaptive noise reduction panel, and you now have access to all of the individual parameters. Now, while I'm showing you this, let me show you something else, because what I want to emphasize, well, let me rephrase that. I don't want to de-emphasize how powerful the single slider is, because this is not simply doing noise reduction more or less. This is an intelligent slider. In fact, it's using a bit of our own machine learning, a bit of AdobeSensei here. Because when you move this single slider, pay attention to what's happening inside this dialog here. Notice it's actually moving multiple parameters simultaneously inside the noise reduction effect. That's right. It's not just more noise reduction. Look, it could simply, you probably would have thought, oh, it's just doing this, reduce noise by, more, less, more, less. No, it's not. It's actually reconfiguring itself across multiple parameters. And the same could be said for all of these various effects. Now, some of them obviously more so than others. The DeEsser is used for sibilance. Now, we don't have any sibilance in here. Sibilants are those harsh S sounds that you often encounter when capturing dialogue. It just depends on how people speak. It depends on the mic that was used. If you were miking someone, again, maybe with a lav, maybe with a boom, maybe with a desktop microphone, if they're not speaking properly on mic, this is often known as speaking off axis, where they're not really talking directly into the capsule of the microphone, sometimes that can emphasize this sound, and it almost feels like it's slicing through your eardrum. That's what a DeEsser does. It removes that S, and or it de-emphasizes the S. And again, as you move that single slider, what you can see is it's not just adjusting threshold, which you would expect in this case, the point at which the de-essing begins as it crosses that threshold, but it's actually also adjusting the center frequency and bandwidth. How many adjacent frequencies adjacent to that actual fundamental of the s that it's attenuating based on the amount that you use in this slider. That just got very technical. The point is, you don't ever have to look at these things. They're just always there running in the background. While the Essential Sound panel itself cannot be used in the track mixer because these are clip-based properties, you can, in the track mixer, across all clips in a single track, apply something like the adaptive noise reduction. And then I could apply across the entire track, go into iFilter at EQ, the FFT filter, which is reduce rumble. And I could apply the studio reverb, which is our creative reverb when we get to that panel down there, across the entire track. So we do allow you to do it. It's a slightly different way of thinking. Again, Essential Sound is tackling clip level problems, clip-based problems, right? Because each clip is going to be a little bit different. But then you have the track mixer where you can apply global changes across every piece of audio that lives in the track. That's a little bit on repair. Now, I'm going to detour slightly here. When I was playing this back, I was noticing that there was one clip in particular that had some noise on it that was just really disturbing. So let's first take a listen to it with all of the sound design. Now, this is a slightly more finished version, so I've tweaked all the dialogue. I've added noise reduction and derumbling to individual clips. I've modified parameters. You can see just between these two, I've adjusted rumble and hum. But there's one clip, I think it's this one right here, where there was just a lot of really bad background noise on the dude's dialogue that was just driving me nuts. So let's see if we can hear it when all the sound design is in there. Take a quick listen.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, now it goes by very quickly. But if you listen, when he says thank you, there's this, it sounds like a jet engine.
That for you.
Thank you.
All right, can't hear it? No problem. Let's go ahead and solo just the dialogue, wind it back. Now take a listen to when he says thank you.
Working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Working here.
Thank you.
So let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
All right. It's really bothering me. And again, when the entire scene was playing with all the sound design, it wasn't that annoying. It wasn't that bad, but I still noticed it, and it was something that I wanted to fix. Here's where we're going to now talk about destructive workflows. It's not really destructive because what in fact we're going to do is a render and replace. You always have access to your original audio clips, but for this particular one, we need to tackle this. Now, a lot of people have asked me in the past with regard to noise reduction, do you actually, destructively reduce noise or remove noise? My answer is yes, frequently. One, because as I mentioned, it's not ever really destructive. We're simply going to right-click or control-click and choose to edit the clip in Audition. And that's basically going to do a render and replace. You'll even see on screen it says render and replacing audio, and then it sends it to Audition. The master clip is always there. The original is always there. The reason, though, for destructive processing is sometimes things just they're not working as well in real time. Or if you've got a lot of clips with problems that need really individual care, there's no reason not to destructively process them. You're making a commitment, there's always undo. So let's go ahead and choose Edit Clip in Adobe Audition. You can see right there it said Render and Replace. It now brings us into Audition, and let's go ahead and play this back by itself. I've got it looping too, so take a listen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, this is how this clip was given to us. So they must have run some kind of noise reduction on this, because you can actually hear the noise kind of fade out. Or maybe they didn't do a noise reduction. Maybe they just did fades. And they didn't leave us a lot of noise before. Now, I do have the whole, again, this was pre-cut. So I have the whole clip with the stuff beforehand, but this is currently what's in my timeline. This is how it was presented to me. So what can I do with this? How can I fix this? Well, we're going to choose a noise print. Now this at the top right here, that's a little too short. That's not enough for us to allow Audition to understand the complexity of that noise to then remove it from everything. So what we want to do is find some of that noise that trails off, but make sure we don't get any of his thank you in there. So let's take a quick listen here.
Thank you. Thank you.
okay? So this section right here is just noise. There's no thank you, there's no glottal sounds or any mouth sounds in there that are going to get in the way and ultimately confuse the noise reduction process. So I'm going to select just the noise on this, Control-click, right-click, and choose Capture Noise Print, okay? And when I do that, it's now going to take a sonic snapshot of all of the elements of that noise, right? And it's just the noise. So now, let's deselect here. If I go up to Effects, Noise Reduction Process, you'll notice Audition, not surprisingly, has many different options, many different flavors of noise reduction natively that you can apply. Let's go into the Process effect. And you've got a lot of parameters in here, a lot of stuff going on. Okay, I'm going to make this real easy for you. We're basically going to use one slider. Now, the one thing you'll have to do, I've made a modification to this. Under Advanced, we have a function here called Spectral Decay. Now, for this example, I don't want any spectral decay. I'm going to get into what spectral decay is next week. I'm not going to talk about it right now. What I will say is this. When you have spectral decay enabled, it does just that. It doesn't delete or subtract noise. It actually allows it to decay over time based on the loudness of, in this case, the dialogue. And more importantly, it just kind of brings it down. It attenuates it. It's still lingering there until there's no speech or whatever at all, and then it decays away. That's sometimes very useful. For this, because it's really overtaking the dialogue, I want to subtract it. I want to get rid of it. So when you set spectral decay to 0, you're effectively turning this noise reduction process into a subtractive noise reduction effect. And that's what we want for this. And then the only thing you're going to have to touch is this noise reduction slider, which is a percentage. 0%, no noise reduction, 100%, full strength. So let's just go ahead and preview this. It's at 90, that's where I must have left it the last time, and take a quick listen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and we're getting a couple like gurgly, bubbly things at the very end there. That's not going to matter in the context of our bar, but maybe we back it off just a little bit. Let's try around 70% and take a listen here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now that actually left more of it in there. So let's go ahead. We're going to go back up to around 86, 85, that's good, and apply it. All right?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And again, we could tweak this further if we want. Let's do a quick undo for the before.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And that's a pretty extreme example. Let's go to the redo for the after.
Thank you.
Okay. Much better. Save. Now I know someone's going, yeah, but there's those weird gurgles. Okay, but again, wait till we're back in the entire context of the scene. So now when I save this, this has now updated the clip, the rendered and replaced version inside Premiere Pro's timeline. So when I click back over to Premiere, if you can see the clip, it's going to happen real quickly. If you watch the clip, you'll actually see the UI update. Here we go. Oh, you just saw it very, very quickly. Now when we wind this back, we go ahead and hit solo on these again. All right, let's play it here.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, that horrible noise is gone. And now when we put this back into the context of everything, it's not going to be so much of an offset.
I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Right? And now when we're back in the whole scene with all of the sound design, the ambient noise, the music.
Thank you.
You don't hear any gurgles. You don't hear any sonic high-pitched artifacts at all. It's all masked by everything else that's going on there, okay? There's also a couple of things that we could do potentially on the Audition side where we could adjust the fade curves here. So let me just go ahead if you weren't seeing all of the UI here, didn't realize that. We have non-destructive fade handles in Audition. So up here at the upper left and right, here's our little fade out. And you can see that I could maybe just adjust the fade out a little more aggressively to get rid of some of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Versus this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Redo it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Save it. Back to Premiere. It updates. Wind back.
5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
And it's awesome. All right. Does that work every time on every type of noise with every kind of file? No, of course not. You're going to have to play around with it. Will it work? Now, you just saw that was an extreme example, and it worked great. The key to that is there was very consistent, just a lot of noise on set. I don't know how they were capturing that, but maybe there was air conditioning, right, on set. I mean, this is why we often do dialogue replacement, because you're in an environment, you can't have your actors sweating unless that's part of the scene. So you might have fans and other things going to keep the set cool. All that sound is going to get captured. And sometimes, you want that on-set performance. That's why you're using boom mics. There's ways to fix it. Sometimes not, and then you've got to go in and replace the dialogue. So you've got options, but that edit and audition feature is very, very useful and very powerful. And it, again, allows you to really make a choice. You're choosing to process this, because now we don't have to deal with that anymore. We're not dealing with any of that noise. And frankly, if the entire clip had all of that severe background noise, I'd probably denoise the whole thing before I even started cutting it up. Straight from the camera video itself, whatever camera he was captured on, okay, or whatever secondary audio was captured for his dialogue. I'd probably do that personally. Now that we've done that, got our dialogue soloed here still, let's talk a little bit about clarity. So with no clips selected, by the way, here I am back in Essential Sound. Once you've got everything denoted as dialogue, music, sound effects, or ambience, if I just click this now, you'll see that it automatically highlights all of the dialogue clips for me, which is really nice. And if we go into our clarity section here, this is now where we have access to effects like dynamics, which is short for our dynamics processor, or compression and limiting. And the reason that you use dynamics is to, again, sort of bring up and refocus your dialogue. And you can actually see that on the slider here, we can go from a more natural sound to a more focused sound. And really what that's going to do is it's just going to bring that voice, bring all those voices up and make them a bit more present, so that they're really sitting on top of all of the sound design. Also, if you use dynamics across all dialogue, and I'll show you this in a little bit, we might go a few minutes over today, but that's okay. This is another way to sort of glue all of your dialogue together, to make it all sort of the same apparent loudness. All right, so we've already done that to some degree with loudness auto matching. But again, you still have peaks that are going to be in and out of that average. Using compression here, now we're going to minimize some of those peaks. And based on how much we use, we can also bring up some of the quieter sections to really make that dialogue very, very even. So with clarity, again, this now allows you to add compression, okay? Compression, if you're not familiar, is one of the most difficult things to apply, because it's very easy to do it incorrectly. With Essential Sound and the Dynamics Clarity slider, you actually can't get it wrong, because once again, using some machine learning technologies via our AdobeSensei technology, this looks at the levels of all of your audio clips and actually sets the threshold parameter, which is the point at which compression begins for all of your audio dynamically, which is amazing, because that's really one of the hardest things to do. Let's start with our Dynamics Clarity slider, and let's just start playing this back with everything. I'm going to try and bring this dialogue up, and you're going to listen and hear what happens as we adjust this slider. Here we go.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
So did you hear, as I was adjusting that slider, her voice was getting louder? You weren't hearing any more noise. You weren't hearing, it felt like she was coming closer, because we're actually focusing on bringing her closer, bringing that sound and kind of unifying that sound, okay? So here it is without dynamics compression.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then let's just add a little bit. I'm gonna overdo it a little just so you can hear what it's done here, but you'll see that it's just a bit more present and just a bit more in your face.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
All right, really upfront. And once again, if we go into the effects controls, let's just look at an individual clip here. What you now see is that we've applied our dynamics processor. Now, we just did this globally to all the clips. That's why I was adjusting hers and his. Now, again, we might need a little bit less on some of those clips. They don't all need the same amount of compression. It's still different voices we're dealing with here. But here, if we go into the edit command, once again, while we only reveal a single slider, you can actually see if you look down here that it's adjusting dynamically the threshold and ratio to give you truly the best sounding dynamic compression, okay? This is another example where, again, if you look at presets just for the compressor, we've got lots of them in here, which you could also apply on an individual clip basis. So you've got a lot of flexibility and a lot of power here within the clarity settings of Essential Sound. Let's go back out and select all our dialogue again. Now, we're going to talk about EQ. And this is, again, where you probably are not going to do this across all clips. EQ, if anything, you would do it across all of her clips at the same time, and then all of his clips, and then all of the other actors' clips. You're not going to apply the same vocal equalization to different voices. Not a great idea, not a best practice. Let's go ahead and select just her voices. Okay. And let's turn on EQ. Now, here is where you're probably going to want to do a little manual tweaking, okay? We've got presets. You can see subtle boost, vocal presence, that public radio sound, podcast voice. And when you choose one of these, you'll see that it applies a particular EQ curve. We've also got this enhance speech checkbox. Try it. I don't use it. Again, there's too many variables involved there. But if we start with something like podcast voice and play this back, and maybe we'll solo this just so you can hear it a bit more discreetly. Once again, I'll just start adjusting the slider and you can hear what it's doing. Take a listen.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Okay. So you can see that it actually made it a little bit brighter and it tried to add a little bit of low mids in there. I'm not loving the way that sounds, so maybe we'll try something like vocal presence, which actually now seems to be cutting a bit more of the low end and boosting some of those mids and upper mids. So the presets will vary. Let's take another listen to this.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you. Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Now that one is actually kind of nice because it is giving us kind of a subtle boost in the upper mid range. But what it's doing is it's actually sort of pulling out the fundamental of where the fundamentals of kind of her high mid frequencies lie. So if we bring everything back in, all right, it's almost like a presence control where you're just making her voice not necessarily louder, but more present and easier to understand against all of the other background sound. If we take a listen, I'll adjust this while it's playing back again and you'll hear what it's doing. Take a listen.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Okay. You hear it? So she's just kind of popping out a little bit more. And if we were to go to something like, the subtle boost male, again, I don't know, these preset names are one thing, but you can see the curve is actually, whereas the female one was a bit wider, had a wider bandwidth, the male curve here is a bit more narrow for whatever reason. These are all seasoned to taste, as we say. And if we were to turn on enhance speech, let's see what that does for this one. All right, I'll start with it off and then I'll turn it on. Here we go.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Yeah, see, for me, that just made it sound a little bit brighter. I didn't love that. So I don't typically ever use this. Try these out. It's always a good idea, by the way. Some people might be saying, well, why aren't you listening to this alone? I did, but you also want to hear it in the context with everything. Now, these other things are already mixed. That's why I'm doing that. But you don't want to just listen to the dialogue discrete. Because again, once you put all that sound design and everything else in there, you may have made the vocal too bright. It might be too present, or maybe it's too bassy and you need to add more presence because you've kind of softened it. So you always want to A/B test against, soloed, discrete dialogue, and dialogue with background sound. Dialogue with some room tone, dialogue super dry, just to give yourself a wider canvas to work from so that you can, again, very quickly just make subtle tweaks to make things sound a little bit better. Okay. Now, the last element here is creative. And we're going to bounce into the mixer because this is where we're going to get a bit more creative. And the creative filter panel here allows you to add, you can see reflections or reverberation, making it look like it took place in a particular environment. So one of the tips, one of the techniques, one of the tricks for good sound is, particularly if you're removing certain elements like rumble and hum and noise and whatever and equalizing, a lot of times you wind up with dialogue or a vocal that's too clean or too dry. And really what you want to do is you want to be able to put that voice back in the environment where it was. So you kind of do a lot of work to remove all the stuff you don't want, but then it almost sounds again like it was recorded in an isolated vocal booth. And that isn't what you want. Sometimes using room tone on an additional track can fix that. But if you place it back in a similar ambient environment, it can really enhance the overall, not just performance, but just the sonic picture of where everything and everyone is in the scene. So for that, now we're going to go into our audio track mixer and talk a little bit about submixing and subgrouping, okay? So now that I've got all the dialogue sort of mixed and tweaked to my liking, what I effectively want to do is I want to put all of that dialogue now on a single slider. I want to be able to control all of it globally. I've balanced everything. Everything is relative to itself. But now I want to add some global controls. And typically some of the global effects or things that I might want to add are compression, as I mentioned, maybe some noise gating, and then some ambience, all right, to place everything in the same kind of environment. So if I look over here inside our track mixer, now we've got two sections. We've got our effects insert section, and then we've got our effects send section. The effects inserts, this is where you can place individual effects, as I showed you before, onto a particular track. So if I wanted to add, again, amplitude and compression, our dynamics processor or our newly revamped dynamics effect to this entire track, I could do that here. But I'm not doing that today. What I want to do is I want to send all of those voiceover tracks to a bus, basically taking all four of those and placing them together in one, okay? To do that, I'm simply going to click on this first effect send, and I'm going to choose Create a Stereo Submix. All right, and when you do that, you'll see it brings up Submix 2. Now, I created one earlier, which I labeled Dialogue Sub. These are both the same, so you can just go ahead and rename this. We'll call this Dialogue MST for Master, okay? And now, on each of our dialogue tracks, I'm going to say, send all of these dialogue tracks to the Dialogue Master Submix, okay? Now, once you do that, you'll see down below that now you have this volume setting, right? Because we have to tell it how much volume do we want to send to that submix volume. Well, we want to send everything. So if you just click inside of here, I'm going to set this to 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, also, if you've got these already pre-mixed down here, you can theoretically use the same levels that you have on the individual tracks, on the individual volume sliders as well. These all happen to be at 0 at Unity, so that's what I'm sending them over as, okay? You'll also notice that you can also adjust the balance to the subgroup. So once again, if you've got things panned, you'll want to probably do that as well, okay? These are all currently working kind of in mono. Maybe, though, for guy number 1, guy number 2, I might actually pan these a little bit. So if we go into balance, I'll take this guy because he's kind of more on the right, put him a little bit more to the right. I'll take this dude, we haven't even heard his voice yet, and put him a little more to the left, okay? Just a bit, little subtle placement there, okay? All right, so we've got our levels, we've got our balance, everything is sent over. let's go over to our dialog master subgroup. So now when we play this back, as you'd expect.
Drink, please.
Okay.
Great. I'd like an elderberry liqueur.
Oh,
Okay. So now we've got everything on this slider. So now what I want to do is I want to apply some global effects to this, okay? So here's where now I can say, all right, for everything, I want to apply a particular compression or a particular reverb effect. So real quickly, I'm just going to come back over here. I'm going to select all the dialogue, and I'm going to disable dynamics. Remember, we turned that on before. I don't want that on the individual ones because we're now going to control this globally. I've already set and made dialogue changes to those the way that I want them. So now what we're really focusing on is adding something to this single slider that's going to affect everyone. The first thing I actually want to do is probably add a little bit of dynamic control, okay? So let's go ahead over here, and now we're going to scroll up. And up at the top here, now because I'm adding effects, I'm going to go to amplitude compression, dynamics, okay? Now this is a newly reimagined dynamics processor. We used to have this in older versions of Premiere Pro. This one now gives us a little more of a beautiful UI. You've got lots of metering available to you. It just works really nicely, and it's a great combo effect. It offers an auto gate, a compressor, expander, and a limiter, kind of everything you need. It also has some nice presets in here. So you can see we can do soft compression, medium, hard, all parameters active, hard limiting, just a noise gate, soft clipping. And these are not bad places to start. Now, similarly, I talked about this before. If you wanted to apply a little bit of noise reduction across everything, this is an opportunity where you could use by itself the adaptive noise reduction and apply this effect over the entire track, right? And we could go into, again, one of our presets here, like a light noise reduction.
but we don't have that.
Well, I've actually been coming here a lot to this establishment, and I know you do, so would you mind double checking?
Oh, well, because you blinked your eyes so tight and really asked, I will double check for you.
Oh, thanks.
Shipment just came in.
No!
Yeah. Do you want a little shot?
Do you want it with ice? Do you want it neat? Neat means no ice.
You know what, I'm
Okay, so you can hear it's kind of doing some weird swishy swirliness on here, but this kind of allows you, if you've got a cut sequence, to leverage this effect a bit more effectively than if you're doing it at the clip level. What I really love to do in particular, though, with grouped dialogue is equalization and, more importantly, actual environment placement, placing things back into a particular environment. So again, if we wanted to use a little equalizer, I will typically recommend the parametric. Now, what it's using when you use the EQ under clarity inside of Essential Sound, it's using a 10-band graphic equalizer. Now, what's nice about this is that this does give you a very visual look at exactly what frequencies are being affected here. You've probably seen this on if you ever had a receiver, an old stereo unit. So we could come over here and just start adjusting, mid frequencies, high mids, low frequencies. So this is something that you can do across everything once effectively if you have all of your dialogue already individually treated. The other thing that I wanted to show you here under Reverb is Studio Reverb. So this is where now we can come in here and add back in the sound of the environment, okay? So once we have that selected, let's go into Studio Reverb. I'm going to choose Room Ambience 2. Again, we want to place them back in a room. And this is just going to add a little space and a little bit of dimension to this. Now, this is a 1600 millisecond decay, which means it's about 1.6 seconds of kind of room echo, which is probably about right for the size of this bar. I'm going to go up just a little bit more to around, say, 1900. We can keep all the rest at the same here. You can see that it's cutting off frequencies, anything above 6500 hertz. So again, you're not going to have a lot of high-end reflection, which is good. It's also cutting off everything below 225 hertz. So you're not going to be adding reverb or ambience to any of the low frequencies. And then all we really need to do is play with this wet-dry balance. Now, typically, I will place the wet signal at 100%. With ambience, you kind of want to mix them a little bit more carefully. So the default is 70% dry, 30% wet. Now, you definitely want to hear this with all the other stuff back in there. But like I said, I'll often start with it just alone and then make changes. So let's take a listen. Here we go.
Hi, yeah, hi. I'd like to get a drink, please.
Okay.
Great. I'd like an elderberry liqueur.
Oh, actually, we don't have that.
I've been here before, and I've definitely had it here, so you have it.
Okay. So could you hear it was just giving us a little bit more of that space, and you can hear a little reflection. Now you might think that sounds almost a bit much, and we could make the room a little smaller. Notice you've got room size and decay. I might back this off just a little to around 1850. But now when we bring everything else back in, let's do the same thing. And once again, I'll start increasing this. Remember, we landed at around 23%, and take a listen to how it really just kind of brings it to life. Here we go.
Drink, please.
Okay.
Great. I'd like an elderberry liqueur.
Oh, actually, we don't have that.
I've been here before, and I've definitely had it here, so you have it.
Oh, okay. I've only been working here for 5 years, so let me just check on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. You notice that it just adds another layer of dimension there. And this is something which you'll typically hear and notice if you watch, again, films and things in 5.1. If they're in an environment like this, they'll often add back in a little room ambience. This is not to be confused with room tone, because that's the actual sound of the room with no one talking. But the ambience here is just going to kind of put them back in an environment, and especially if they're already placed in stereo, this is going to give you even more control over kind of just allowing them to live in a sort of wider space. Now, that's not to say that you don't want dialogue sometimes very dry and all sort of focused in the center. Yes, sometimes you do. But a little bit of ambience can go a long way. And this is the same thing that you saw in the dialogue setting of Essential Sound under Creative, except now we've applied it to the track, the entire track. And in this case, not necessarily the track, but the group of tracks via this submix inside of Premiere Pro's mixer. Okay, so we have covered a lot of stuff today. Submixing, adding effects at the track level, adding effects at the clip level, the Essential Sound panel, de-rumbling, de-humming, loudness auto-matching, repairing dialogue, equalization, enhancing speech, clarity via the dynamic slider, an enormous amount of stuff here for part one, and all of this being done in Premiere, with the exception of our semi-destructive noise reduction process in Audition, which we will cover more in the next episode of how to make good videos great with audio. So thanks again for joining me. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.